So look at his statements in the past 1 year. The future belongs to India. Cannot imagine Prime Minister Narendra Modi being intimidated. He's a patriot for his country. These are President Putin's words for Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Prime Minister's India First policy. But is it a tough tightrope walk for India? Is the West still attempting to browbeat India, to bully India to fall in line? Let's try and make sense of these statements and the implications. Joining me on this special, Tatiana Kukhareva is a journalist who joins us from Moscow. Also with me on the show, Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, and Ambassador Mohan Kumar, a former top diplomat. And Tatiana, I want to begin by asking you, how is President Putin praising Prime Minister Narendra Modi being viewed in Russia? And of course, India's stance on Russia all along since the Russia-Ukraine conflict started.
Well, good evening to you. Obviously, Russia is very, we've been following the development of, India-Russia ties from here, as well as, you guys are watching what's going on back in India. And I think that the praise that President Putin gave to Prime Minister Modi is very expected, in the country, in our country, because, we appreciate just how deep the ties are between the two, and all of the, the BRICS nations, the BRICS club, which is extremely important, in my view, in my personal view. And I think that for everybody in Russia who's following international politics, it's an extremely important path that we are laying together with India, with other BRICS nations.
Okay, Ambassador Kumar, is President Putin's comment, are they aimed at India, or are they may aim more at the US and NATO countries, or is he killing two birds with one stone?
Thank you very much for having me. My sense is there are three inferences which can be drawn from President Putin's statement. One, I think he is reflecting his own personal chemistry with Prime Minister Modi. They've got along well. Second, I think it's also a geopolitical statement. He's indicating to the West that you cannot browbeat India, and therefore India can stand on its own. Third, and last but not the least, I think the External Affairs Minister in his book, The India Way, had said that the multi-alignment foreign policy of India is based on engaging the United States, cultivating Europe, reassuring Russia, and bringing in Japan. I thought that he had put into practice, under the leadership of the Prime Minister, the External Affairs Minister has been able to implement this mantra in the case of Ukraine. And that is why I think India's diplomacy, which I think you can see a lot of dexterity and agility in it, I would give it full marks in so far as Ukraine is concerned. It's no secret that we came under pressure from the West, but I think we stood our ground and indicated to them that there are tremendous national interests at stake and we cannot sacrifice them. So that's the way I interpret the statement of President Putin.
But let's now break this down, because you've made some very important points, as is Tatiana. Sushant Sareen, the US did try to bully India. US tried to dissuade India from either buying the S-400 system or even Russian oil. And that intimidation or those bullying tactics, in some ways or the other, they still continue, Sushant Sareen.
Yeah, but look, Gaurav, I think we need to understand all diplomacy is a tightrope walk, and all countries will try and pull you in their direction to serve their own interest. And it's up to the leadership of a country to decide which side its interests lie and how it wishes to protect its own interests, which is exactly what India has done. So yes, I don't hold it against the Americans that they will pressure us, that they will browbeat us, they'll try and bully us at times. This is what countries do. This is what powerful countries do to smaller countries, right? And compared to the US, yes, we are a smaller country. Let's make no bones about it. But then how do you stand up for your own rights? How do you stand up for your own interests? And that is exactly what we have done. The point is that, whether it's the S-400 missile system, or it's the oil. And I think Dr. Jaishankar later on also made the point, many months later, in fact, that India's purchases of oil from Russia has actually been a global good.
Yes.
In the sense that we managed to make sure that oil prices don't go up. We managed to ensure that oil supplies continue. And in fact, the countries which have imposed sanctions on the Russians are actually buying the finished product from us.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
and then taking care of their own economies and, their own heating and their own people. So,
And that's one part of the story. But Tatiana, is Russia now too indebted to China? Will Russia respect both relationships in the times ahead, or is there a tilt towards China now?
Well, I've heard this, I've heard these accusations many times now, especially concerning the situation unfolding in Israel, between Israel and Gaza. But unfortunately, I don't believe that we have any grounds to talk about any kind of disbalance in this relationship. I mean, Russia has been respecting both relationships with India and China. Those are very different relationships, as I might add. And also, if you look again at the BRICS platform, then you can see that even India and China, despite the fact that it's a turbulent relationship, but it's a relationship nonetheless. It's a difficult one, but it's still developing. And both, it's not as simple as choosing one side against the other. I would say that this is a very kind of American way of looking at the situation. It's either one or the other. I believe that Russia's relationship with both countries are extremely important, and we've been doing very well at balancing them.
Okay,
but
it's not one at the cost of the other.
I would love to hit on the...
But let me take that to Ambassador Kumar. Is there a genuine apprehension, Russia dependent, as some argue, more on China, especially after sanctions and the Russia-Ukraine conflict? And is there an apprehension that in the years ahead, it may not be that close a strategic partner as Russia was in the past?
I think there are three things that needs to be underlined, I think. The first thing is that there is no question in my mind that Russia has become more dependent on China over the last 2-3 years. No question at all. The trade figures and the other figures will support that. The second thing the second point I'd like to make is that I think Putin's statement is also aimed at China. The Putin's statement that Prime Minister Modi is tough and that he's not going to sacrifice his interests, the statement that he makes about Russia-India relations is also a subtle message to China that, listen, we also do strategic hedging. We would like to have good ties with both China and India, so don't expect us to become a completely junior partner to China. I think the Russian country, the Russians are too proud. It's a big country. We don't know what will happen to the conflict in Ukraine, so I'm not able to exactly look into the crystal ball and see what kind of a country Russia will become. But things remaining the same, Gaurav, I don't expect Russia to completely accept the status of a junior partner to China for a very long period of time. And I think that is why India has valuable leverage vis-a-vis Russia as well.
It's interesting you should say that. When Sushant Sareen, your appreciation of Russia's ties with India vis-a-vis Russia's ties with China, given the friction at the line of actual control since 2020.
Yeah, but I think, Gaurav, when we raise this question, and yes, I think we are entitled to raise this question because we have a serious problem with China. But, when we ask the Russians to choose between us and China, it's like somebody asking us to choose between Russia and the US. Now, just as we have a trade of $150 billion with the Americans and just about, or a fraction of that with Russia, that does not mean that our relations with Russia are any less important than our relations with the US. Similarly, when you look at Russia's relationship with China, yes, there is a certain amount of, and that economic dependency is deepening, and it is there. But that does not mean that, Russia has absolutely, doesn't find any utility in building up its relationship with India. So I think that is going to happen. Similarly, on the whole balancing act, the Americans do it with us, don't they? For example, they are not going to break off their relationships with any third country with which we have very testy relations simply because they are getting close to us. Similarly, to expect that the Russians would do something similar is not going to happen. The problem, however, will come if in the event our relationship with the Chinese goes further south and there is some kind of conflict along the borders, and then we are dependent upon the Russians for some of our military supplies. Will those supplies be forthcoming in time for our own purposes or not? Will the Chinese lean upon the Russians? Will the Russians accept that pressure? I think those are very serious questions which continue to occupy us. But other than that, purely on the diplomatic thing, to expect a binary kind of a relationship.
No, but that's a very important point that you raise, and perhaps that is something that military planners, and that is why this big push on Make in India, because Tatiana, God forbid, if India-China relations worsen, and if we need more military hardware or equipment or spares or replenishments, and Russia either is unwilling or unable to provide to India and is under pressure from China, where does that take the relationship?
Well, look, that is a huge speculation, and it's a very scary speculation, to say the least, to even suggest that this relationship between India and China goes that much further south. First and foremost,
okay, give me a moment as we try and reestablish that link with you. But let me take that to Ambassador Kumar. Ambassador, does the West continue to try and browbeat India or intimidate India? For example, this latest investigation and the FBI chief coming to India with that Pannu case or that other instance with Canada with the Nijjar case. Is the West trying to intimidate India and wean us away from Russia?
I would not use the word intimidate or browbeat. After all, with the United States, we now have a close strategic partnership, and it's a multifaceted strategic partnership. But I would say, yes, there are conversations surrounding areas where we have disagreements with the United States, and the United States will always seek to advance their interest as we seek to do ours. So I do not see a direct correlation between, let's say, our ties with Russia, for example, and the Panun case or the Nijjar case. I would hesitate drawing a straightforward link between the two, but we need to understand that relationships have to find a certain level, and there are disagreements even among very, very close strategic partners. My sense is that India now finds itself in a position where differences can be managed. And the whole mantra of multi-alignment is that with the United States, you try to engage them, manage your differences. China, you keep them at bay, you cultivate the EU, and then you try to preserve what the relationship with Russia stands for, which is essentially supply of defense platforms. Okay. So for the time being, we are doing a wonderful job, and I wouldn't engage in too much of hypotheticals, Gaurav. We'll just have to take one step at a time.
Fair enough. Point taken, sir. Sushant Sareen, President Putin's reading of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, perhaps a little better than President Biden's administration's reading of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whether it's the Pannu case or the Nijjar case. There's no browbeating India to fall in line?
No, I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that President Putin, whatever compliments he pays, which is a little unusual, especially the way somebody like him pays compliments. He's not exactly known for giving a lot of compliments to people. So which is nice. But look, there could be a certain amount of diplomatic gamesmanship also involved in it. It kind of puts us in a bit of a spot that the Russians, are so much in love with you. What do the Americans do with us? But I don't think that there is, and I'm not going after, behind what the American lapdog media, the New York Times, etc., say about India. But by and large, I've seen that with the current Biden administration also, our relationships are pretty strong. In fact, you've seen the kind of body language when the two leaders meet, the kind of engagements and the expanding sphere of engagements that we have with the Americans. That would not be happening if there was deep reservations about the kind of leadership there is in India. And I think the Americans, like many others, understand that there is a very strong possibility that they might have to continue to deal with this government for another 5 years and maybe even more.
Okay.
So are they going to simply turn their face away simply because they might not agree with some of the things Mr. Modi and his party stand for? Just as we are not in agreement with everything that the American administration, the current administration, or the American political system espouses. I don't think we agree with a whole lot of things they do.
Fair enough. So it's being multi-aligned. Is it? And are we therefore perhaps in a sweet spot or the sweetest spot possible and need to just build on that? I've run out of time. I haven't run out of questions. There's a lot more. There's a lot more that we need to talk about perhaps in the days and weeks ahead. But Tatiana, Ambassador Kumar and Sushant Sareen, as always, many thanks for joining me.